like to call this meeting of the Clay County Commission to order. We will begin with our invocation. Mr. Administrator, when you are prepared, please proceed.
Pray with me. This is the day the Lord hath made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Father, we ask your presence in this gathering today. We ask that you be with us as we deliberate and as we adjourn. We ask this all in Jesus' blessed name. Amen.
Please rise for the pledge. Thank you. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Welty?
Here.
Commissioner Thompson?
Here.
Here.
That brings us to approval of the agenda. Is there a motion related to approval of today's agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as printed.
Motion has been made for approval of today's agenda. Discussion, are there any additions, deletions, or any other alterations contemplated for today's agenda? Mr. Counselor.
Yes, Commissioners, I would request respectfully to add legal under executive session, 610-021 sub 1. And for one item that I have discussed with the Commission already.
Very well. Is there a motion to amend our agenda related to the recommendation of council?
I move that we add legal to the agenda.
Okay. I'll go ahead and restate your motion then.
Absolutely.
Motion has been made to amend our agenda today to include under executive sessions number 17, legal, that is Missouri Statute 610.021, parentheses 1. Discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
That brings us to the underlying motion by Commissioner Thompson, approval of the agenda. Now approval of the agenda as amended. Are there any other comments or discussion on today's agenda? Commissioner Carpenter, do you have anything?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Thompson, you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
That brings us to meeting schedule. Mr. Administrator?
Commissioners, the next regularly scheduled session of the Clay County Commission is to be held on Wednesday, July the 28th at 6 p.m.
Thank you. There are no honorary resolutions at this time. That brings us to discussion items. Mr. Administrator, if you'd like to outline the first item under discussion today.
First item for discussion is to discuss engaging consultants to assist in the administration of the newly released American Rescue Plan Act and to talk about the wisdom of doing that.
Thank you very much. I had brought this up, so I'll go ahead and open the discussion, and then we can hear comment from other commissioners. The reason I brought that up is the county is in the process of receiving some $48 million from the federal government in the form of the American Rescue Plan Act, half of which has already been received. I think we're getting more and more clarification as we go along, and I certainly want to point out that County Auditor Hurlburt has been a great help in making sure that we have guidance in what are the appropriate expenditures under that law. However, going forward, I think it is going to be helpful for us to have outside consultants. The few items that we have, in fact, worked on related to those funds have seemed, in my view, entirely black and white. But as we go forward and we get more and more guidance from the federal government and it becomes maybe more of a moving target, I think it is a good idea for us to consider engaging a consultant so that we are able to do a couple of things. One is the work that Auditor Hurlburt has done, I think, has been great. But I'm concerned about putting so much responsibility on him. I think we need to make sure that we have the ability to have an outside consultant, and in the event that we may end up in areas that are a bit more gray, by having an outside consultant We have someone who is able to come up with an outside opinion, and I think if there are any questions from the federal government or any other entities, we have the ability to say that we had taken every measure to make sure that we were compliant, and I think this would demonstrate a good faith effort on our part if there are any questions about any of these expenditures, which my understanding is if we do inadvertently make an expenditure not in compliance, we may well be responsible for repaying those monies, and that could be a substantial burden for us. So it seems like a reasonable precaution on my part, obviously depending on what kind of monies are involved. So what I guess I'm looking for today would be to have the commission express their opinion as to whether or not we should instruct staff to go forward and investigate the costs and the circumstances and make a presentation to the commission about possible future actions related to that. So that's just kind of a rough outline of what what I was looking to do by starting this conversation. So does any commissioner want to weigh in on this one at this moment? Commissioner Carpenter?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, no, I'm certainly open to the idea. Obviously, it's a big amount of money that we have responsibility over, and understanding rules from Treasury in terms of how we can utilize those funds would probably help. For me, it would be pretty dependent on what the specific offer is in terms of, are they going to keep costs pretty reasonable, low? Obviously, getting one-time advice in terms of how to spend the money makes sense to me, as opposed to maybe a expensive ongoing commitment that we would make as a county to a consultant. But certainly open to whatever presentation, as you say, that we would receive.
I don't know that, without getting too deep in the weeds, I would hope that it might be more of a, perhaps a retainer type of thing to where it was not a constant outflow of money, but just to have them there, and then as pertinent questions came up, because many of the questions I believe are going to be pretty cut and dry. Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, Commissioner. I am very open to this idea. I'm also curious to see how we'd move forward with this, with the funding aspect, and if it would be like we would bring them in for a contractual obligation, or if they would be an ongoing, or if it's just a one-time, they bring us like a list of ideas. But I think we probably could use some help kind of delegating this, and I think our auditor's got a lot going on right now, but I would love to keep him in the loop, and as long as he feels comfortable with what's going on. Do we know of any other counties that are utilizing any kind of consultant work like this, or?
I'm not entirely sure of their arrangement, but my understanding is I spoke with some people over in Platts, a member of their commission, and I believe they have engaged someone for those kinds of activities. I have not talked to that commissioner and drilled down on it yet, but yeah, my understanding is Platte County is doing something along those lines. Okay. So I think that might be a good template as we're doing research and say, so what's Platte County doing? And just kind of get an idea of if they've already run some of the traps, perhaps we can save ourselves a step or two.
That's exactly what I was thinking, yes. So that's all the questions I had today.
And by the way, something that you touched on I think is absolutely necessary, and that is in a lot of these expenditures, whether it's the rental program or any of the others that we're engaging in, certainly the auditor, certainly the treasurer, a number of people within county government have been involved in that, in those actions. And this would, I would contemplate this in no way being a substitute, but a supplement to those efforts. I very much want to see those individuals still involved in this process because I think their value added is tremendous. Commissioner Carpenter, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No.
Okay. Anything else? Would anyone else like to make comment on this? If you would, please come forward. Certainly, Mr. Auditor.
Good morning, Commissioners. Victor Hurlbert, Clay County Auditor. Yeah, I think we need to keep an open mind, and someone from an independent perspective could offer a different opinion. I just, briefly, I think it's pertinent to the conversation if you'll indulge me with where we are at with the rescue plan, $24 million, as he said. So, we've done 2 resolutions or authorizations of payments with the prosecutor case backlog for 2 years. They estimate $180,000 a year. I'd increase that to around $400,000. Ultimately, we'll reimburse those payroll costs. Operation Safe, the consortium payment, resolution 2021-163, $1.8 million. Coming before you in the future, we'll hear from the sheriff on the radio encryption that they've discussed before. I think the revenue loss category is perfect for that. It's a government service. There are no restrictions on the eligibility for that, and we have exactly enough money to do that with the calculation I performed based on U.S. Treasury guidance. So all in total, that's around $3 million. Previously, we discussed the bond budget of looking at what to do with the 2018 COPS. We identified $3.1 million in eligible stormwater, floodwater projects that could be expended under the rescue plan. Something that we might want to consider going forward is just authorizing those projects and then spending it like normal accounts payable. That could really speed up the process in that instead of every single project before the commission. An idea for that list, which we presented. On the screen, yes, I worked with staff to create a transparency as well as informational website. It's required by the guidance, which I'm the one right now who will be making the compliance reports to Treasury for the rescue plan. Along with that $3.1 million for the stormwater, floodwater at Smithville Lake, we did identify another $1.4 million for park projects. So in guidance release June 23rd, and I appreciate your comments, Commissioner Nolte, on it being a moving target, it certainly is. They ultimately said, many governments saw significantly increased use of parks during the pandemic, which we did. Our revenues for parks were up. That resulted in damage or increased maintenance needs. The interim final rule, we're still on an interim final rule, no final rule, recognizes that decreases to a state or local government's ability to effectively administer services can constitute a negative economic impact of the pandemic. So it is eligible. We can do any maintenance project at the park. And so from the bond list, we got $1.4 million. That could be a lot larger. I know Deputy Administrator Walters said that the dredging project could be a higher cost as well. So ultimately, all that considered, $7.6 million to $24 million, or about 31%. So that's where we're at. In addition, let me mention too, we had a conversation yesterday with Deputy Administrator Shaw with IT looking at a broadband type project. The city's got their own money this time, unlike the CARES Act, so we're focusing on unincorporated Clay County, but guidance also says you can pool money, work together, so that's maybe something we work with EDC, do a joint countywide effort. Our cities are mostly connected, but it could be another large chunk of that. I think there's no way the external community component for this program besides Operation Safe. So I think my opinion on how this relates, back to the consultant, apologize, is if the role is to tell us what is and what isn't eligible, I'll be candid, I don't see, to be frank, I don't see much value. I really don't. This is public information. Maybe if we have a question in a gray area, I agree. We could do that on an as-needed basis. But what I would see, and maybe something to consider, is could said consultant help us with that external program and working with economic recovery? Because that's something we just don't have a skill set on, right? Look at the rental program as a precedent. We're working with nonprofit agencies, experts in the field. County can't do that. We're not set up to do that. It's not what county government does. So that would be my input as far as hiring a consultant. And I think, yes, other counties have done this. It is an authorized cost, an administrative cost within the guidance to do so. But that would be kind of how I would see the role in such a consultant, and especially when we get the second 24 million, when we get to 48 million. But again, we have 3 years to use this, to the end of 2024. So we have quite a bit of time to use it. So that's my input. I'll stand open for any questions. And that's it.
No, I appreciate your comments, and 2 points that I would make, I guess, related to what you said. One is, I would see this consultant as a resource that, for instance, yourself could draw on. It's not necessary that everything goes through a particular way, but I think the most efficient communications are the best. And the second thing that you hit on, which I think is awfully important, is, as you say, up to this point, it's been fairly cut and dry, black and white. I think it's important, I think it's a general principle, at least on my part, that we strengthen the relationship between county and municipalities and other forms of government. If we can use this money to forward that, it seems to me then we are delving into a lot grayer an area, and I think this would be a place where that particular kind of a help would be very instructive, because it's a matter of, if we can pool, maybe we can have a little bit more efficiency of expenditures between county municipal governments. And, you know, I've said it before, and I'll say it again, and that is, I think the future of this county is very much tied with the relationship we have with our municipalities and our other political subdivisions. So the more closely we can work with those entities, the better, and I believe this is an opportunity to do that very thing. And again, I appreciate the way, I mean, just the demonstration of what you showed us a moment ago, I think is an illustration of the value that you bring to the process, and we certainly appreciate it. Commissioner Carpenter, did you have anything you would like to ask or add?
No, just thanks to the auditor for the input. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Thompson?
Nope, nothing to add, thank you. I do like the idea of bringing in and utilizing those funds to help our surrounding communities and municipalities. So I think that's a great aspect we should look into.
Are there any other comments that would add to this discussion? Seeing none, I'm just going to ask for a consensus of the commission that we instruct staff to go forward and to investigate engaging a consultant and then report back to us for prospective action. Is that agreeable to the commissioners?
Yes.
It is.
Does staff feel they have sufficient instruction to go forward?
Absolutely. I would add, I don't think there's any way to overstate the value of the auditor's office in this process. They have performed superbly. They were entirely responsible for the management of the rental assistance program, and the evidence is very clear of how valuable that was. I agree. We're asking an awful lot of them, and it's going to get even busier since we're about to open a budget season. So I think the appropriate thing to do is to go and exactly as you said, identify somebody that I would suggest would be an asset to the overall process, including the auditor's office, on how to manage these dollars. And I think it's the right thing to do.
Very well. If there's no further comment, we will close this portion of the discussion. That brings us to our second discussion point. Mr. Administrator?
Commissioners, the second topic for discussion is to talk about the organization of a redistricting commission in Clay County that is mandated, and to discuss how the appointment of those residents to that commission would go about.
Okay. Once again, this is an item that I had requested that we put on, so I'll kind of open the discussion, and I'm going to depend on our counselor to give us any of the finer points. I'll just kind of outline a general timeline. I'm not sure about the dates, but I believe we will be getting census information in perhaps as early as middle of next month. Our Constitution, I believe, requires 60 days within getting that information that we convene our redistricting commission. And then they will, of course, draw the line as far as where east and western districts are within the county. What I would like to do would be to begin the process of taking applications, and I want to open the process up as much as possible. And the other thing is I want to make sure that we have, obviously within the bounds of Sunshine Law, that we have the involvement of the other two commissioners as we go forward on this, as well as the general public. So with that, Mr. Counselor, can you kind of give us a little bit a deeper dive into what the process is and how we should proceed?
Sure. So
Oh, yeah.
the redistricting committee, again, so within 60 days of the census being released, the 2020 census, the county commission is obligated to appoint a 7-member redistricting committee. So 7 members, 3 have to be comprised, at least 3 from each district, current district. So there'll be 3 from one district and 4 from the other. That group then needs to meet within 30 days, and I believe it's within 90 days they have to submit their findings and recommendations for adoption to this body for approval. For as far as qualifications, and qualifications are probably fairly important here, they need to be a resident and registered voter of the county for at least 2 years prior to being appointed, and a resident of their respective district for at least 1 year. They cannot be an employee or a vendor or have a contractual relationship with the county. And they cannot be related to an elected office holder of the county or the county administrator. And then the last one is not relevant here, which is they can't have served on the last review commission, since this is the first. That won't matter. But then, and really their sole duty at this time is going to be to address districts, and really just the 2 districts for the commission. And that's really about it.
And that appears in, just for the people who may not have documentation from, that is covered under our Constitution under
Section 9.
Section 9.
Yeah.
And I believe it's .05 is what we're looking at there. Thank you.
903 to 906 really addresses
Yeah,
that.
it really does cover,
specifically.
it's got several of them there. The only thing that I would add, and this is not obviously a qualification that would be something that would be under our Constitution, but I think it was something that we should be taking into account when we are considering these nominees, and that is that we are in an election year. Obviously, it would the question of whether a candidate or somebody with a candidate committee be appropriate would, I think, raise some definite concerns and some definite questions. The only other thing I would add before opening it up for further discussion is that this, as with all of our boards and commissions and other assignments, will be done with consulting the administrator. That's something that I think comes into play here. So certainly we want to make sure that we are doing our best due diligence to have the conversation broad enough to where everybody has input before we seat this particular commission. So with that, would any other commissioner like to comment or have anything to say? Commissioner Carpenter?
Sure. Just for clarity on the 30 days after the census information, so we don't have an exact sense yet of when that is going to come out, right? And there's talk that it might be delayed this year.
Well, my understanding is that we are already delayed, that this, typically we would have had it by this point in time, and what do we, end of July of, the year after. My understanding is we typically would have had it by now. We don't. So, yeah, I keep hearing it's been delayed, but I've also been hearing they're getting very close.
Okay, and then there's a 90-day period, right, for
them to do their work.
For them to do their work.
Yeah.
Which, it could well be that if the census gets so delayed, that we wouldn't really have a full 90 days in terms of filing deadlines before.
Yes, that's the anxiety that happens right now. And I guess if it were to go on a year from now, we would probably have to go as is with our districts as they're currently comprised, and then it would take effect at the next election after that. But certainly my hope is we'll have a census to operate off of before then.
Understood. Thank you.
Commissioner Thompson?
No questions right now, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, one of the things that I think recommends a timeliness factor here is the idea that we do not know when we're going to be getting this information. I've heard as early as middle of August. That sounds optimistic to me, quite honestly. But on the other hand, I think that because it is such a moving target, we need to be prepared to put that, to seat that commission or that committee as soon as possible so that they can do their work and get through the process as efficiently as possible. So, and that also gives us the maximum amount of time to consider. So I would also recommend at some point that we set a deadline of some sort, perhaps 45, 60 days out, to receive applications for this, but that's something I think that would require, some thought and discussion on the part of the commission. Just to give us a deadline so that we can have these individuals queued up and ready to jump in and do this, because as somebody is running for office, it's kind of hard to run for an office if you're not sure of what the parameters are for your district. Did you have something, Mr.
As to
Counselor?
the timing question, I think that's an excellent idea, that there's no reason that you could not solicit applications immediately and leave that window open to whatever time you like, but then, to be honest, then you'd have a pile of applications ready for appointment as soon as the census is released, and you could appoint someone or a group and have them ready to go.
I have a question of staff, and this is maybe one that does not have an answer at this moment. Obviously, we have an application process online for the boards and commissions that are presently in existence. This one has a couple of extra provisos. What would be a reasonable expectation for us to be able to have an online ability to take applications, assuming that there's going to be a requirement that there are some extra questions that are going to need to be asked? For instance, we're going to need to either ask, or we are going to have to, on our own, determine which existing district a person is a member of. So can you give us kind of a feel for what you would like as far as staff goes to prepare to be able to accept applications?
Well, I think we have a very good template as far as an application is concerned now, and so I'm confident that we can go into that template and add additional information that we would be asking for. So I would suggest to you, we would have an application ready online within early next week. And that would be a very reasonable time frame. I've got crack staff that can work on that and get that done. But I also would suggest as well that the commissioners, as you identify people that might be a candidate for this, is to do some of that diligence having to do with residential voting, previous service, and some of the things that we will ask for on that application.
Well, I had every confidence that it would be a quick turnaround on staff. And the only other thing I can think is just we might want to make sure the council gets a peek at that one, since it has
Sure.
something to do with since it has to do with this particular subject. Before we go to comments from other folks, I just want to go around to the commissioners. Again, Commissioner Thompson, do you have any, in light of what was just discussed, do you have anything you'd like to ask or add?
Well, I don't have any questions now, since we just are having a discussion on this. I do think it's probably wise that we get started on this, and we probably should start receiving applications and getting through the process. I know that with our new form of government going into place, the presiding commissioner makes the selection. Will the associate commissioner still be able to see all of the applicants in whole, like?
Yeah.
Okay.
That is a great, I mean, yes, I was acknowledging your question, but the answer is also yes.
Okay.
And one of the things that I am trying to exercise some caution in is to make sure that I'm trying to kind of walk the balance of consulting the associate commissioners and still stay compliant with sunshine law. That is part of, I think, my consultation on these things with the administrator, and the administrator certainly has the ability to be able to communicate back. Mr. Counselor, am I staying within the reasonable boundaries of what sunshine law requires of us?
Yeah, I think so, absolutely.
But yeah, I think that it's, I can't imagine us going forward without having, especially on something this important, without having that input involved. And that's another reason for starting early, so that we have the ability to have this conversation in as full a manner as possible. So that's kind of the goal for starting early, is that we have our timeline that we can not feel overly rushed. Commissioner Carpenter, do you have anything you'd like to add at the moment?
No, I'm good to proceed. Thank you.
Okay. I see we have someone queued up that would like to speak on this subject. Please identify yourself and join the discussion.
Lydia McAvoy, collector. This kind of goes to input as well, and I understand from what you're saying that maybe it's going to be kept very confidential, but one tradition of the collector's office has always been to make sure that the commission is informed if any applicant for anything owes taxes in Clay County. And so if there were any way to at least know the names, and I understand maybe it'll come on a work session and a business session. I'm not sure how that will work, but understanding the Constitution neglected to make a requirement even for people that would take office, it still might be important for the public to know and for you to know when you're making your decision. We have had situations before where people wanted to contract with the county and had an extremely problematic tax record. So we would love to just give you a one-sentence opinion. They do owe taxes to the county, and here's a copy of the bill, or they are paid up as far as we know. It just seems to be relevant.
No, I appreciate that point, and that's something that has actually arisen on occasion on other board and commission appointees. I think our best option on that is to depend on our staff to interact with with your office and to make sure that those applicants are indeed qualified. So there would be, while I think Commissioner Thompson's point is a good one, I think commissioners should see all applications. I think before moving too far forward, I think there is a vetting process that is the appropriate role for staff to play. So while we would see them all, I think we still need to have staff do a little bit of research to make sure that we are where we need to be, and then we go from there to make our decision.
The collector's office would need nothing but a name, potentially an address if their name is John Smith, and 10 minutes. And there could even be issues if they're currently paid up, bounce checks, just history in the collector's office with paying taxes to Clay County. And just, again, still your discretion, maybe it's, whatever, but we would just want to make sure that that information was known to you.
I think we want to make sure that we are as protective as possible of the personal information of any applicant, within our ability to do so. So I think that's a good point, that we exercise some level of discretion when it comes to the personal information of citizens, particularly those who would volunteer their time and talents to a vital function of the government.
Absolutely.
Do either commissioners have any questions or comments for the? Okay, very good. Thank you. I guess the last thing that I would bring up on this is, do we want to at this time establish a deadline, or do we want to take that up at a later time? My personal recommendation, if we were to set a deadline, to have it no earlier than the end of August, but I'm wide open, or we can take this issue up and establish a deadline later.
Oh, in terms of getting the application process going?
Correct. No, in other words, to say, at this point, applications, if you haven't had your application in, then you're too late.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly open to suggestion on that. I agree with the consensus that we get the ball rolling before waiting on the census data to come in. But in terms of exact dates, I'm open to suggestion for sure.
Okay. Commissioner Thompson, do you have any thoughts on that or any other parts of the discussion?
No, I feel very comfortable if you want to go ahead and put in something for the end of August. We go ahead and have some applications accepted by then, and I'm fine with that.
That's 5.5 weeks. That seems plenty of time.
I was going to say that it doesn't seem too short. I kind of like the idea of ending it at the end of a month, because that's a very easy deadline for people to understand. And if it turns out that we can obviously amend that if necessary. So I guess what I would say is two things then. Is that acceptable?
Perfect.
Okay, so I guess if this is the consensus of the commission, I would ask staff to establish the online application, to work with the collector's office on any vetting issues, and ask them to also, via a press release and other methods, to disseminate the information that we are, in fact, looking for applicants for this particular position. Does that sound like acceptable to everybody?
It does to me. Thank you.
Commissioner Thompson?
I feel good with that.
And does staff need any further instruction, or do you feel comfortable with that level of detail?
So the deadline for receipt is the end of August.
Last day of August.
Okay, yes, we can comply with that.
Okay. With that, I don't see anyone else ready to join the discussion, so we will end the discussion there, and then we will proceed with our agenda. Thank you very much. That brings us to public hearings. There are none listed. This is a work session, so there is no consent agenda. That brings us to our regular agenda, and I believe the first three items are grouped together. So, Mr. Administrator, if you would like to proceed with those items, please do so.
Commissioners, resolutions 2021-189, 2021-190, 2021-191 are all in the manner of approving, requested approval of a subdivision, the Barnyard 2. And there's a zoning order and a preliminary plat and a final plat to consider. And I will turn the floor over to Planning and Zoning for further comment.
Please proceed.
This is Kip Jones, Planning and Zoning Manager. This is a rezoning preliminary and final plat for approximately 40 acres located off of Francis Road. I have it pulled up on the screen. It's outlined in the yellow. Just want to give you a general vicinity. This is Francis Road that runs on the east side, 92 highways just to the south, E Highway just to the west, and then this is the Ectonville gas station kind of to the south and west. So we're talking about subdividing 40 acres into 3 lots. You can see they are shaded with different colors. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. There's several ponds on the property. We've got 3 different lot sizes. Lot 5, shaded in the yellow, is a 5-acre lot. This would be zoned R5, residential ranchette, which is our current zoning for lots between 5 and 10 acres. Lot 4, approximately 11 acres, shaded in the purple, has a couple ponds as well. This would be zoned R1, which is residential rural. That's our current standard for lots that are between 10 and 20 acres. And then in back, we have a 20-plus acre lot, approximately 23 acres, shaded in the blue. It also has a couple ponds. Since this does not have any road frontage, it would be served by an easement through lot number 5. The current code allows this lot not to have road frontage if it is 20-plus acres. So we're talking about subdividing that 40 acres into 3 lots. This parcel is located in the natural resources tier and also the urban services transition sub-tier. The natural resources tier allows a 5-plus acre lot as long as you do what's called an agricultural land preservation. That's a way for the county to keep a portion of the lot natural looking where you cannot build a house or an accessory building. So lots 4 and 5 in the front have included a percentage of the lot in the ALP area. The back lot was not required to since it's larger than 20 acres. This case with any rezoning was noticed in the Courier Tribune and certified letters were sent to adjacent property owners. There are 5 rezoning criteria that are included in the transmittal, which review and decision-making bodies should consider these 5 criteria with any rezoning application. There is a blue line stream that runs through the property, runs through the ponds here. We will place a 75-foot setback. It's basically kind of irrelevant because most of it runs through the ponds, but they cannot build anything within that 75-foot setback. The applicant did receive all their outside agency approvals, including from the Highway Department, the Water District, and the Public Health Center. This property is served by the Smithville Fire District. The Planning and Zoning Commission voted 4-0 to 1 to recommend approval of this application for the rezoning preliminary and final plat with 3 conditions that are noted in Exhibit A. I would be happy to answer any questions the commissioners may have, and the applicant is present as well.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the commission at this time?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Thompson, do you have questions?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner.
Please proceed.
So I see that it's 4-0 to 1. Can you give me the breakdown of how that was voted on?
Yeah, so there were 4 approvals, no denials, and we had 1 abstention because the applicant serves on the Planning and Zoning Commission. That's not, so all of our Planning and Zoning Commission members are required to live in unincorporated Clay County. So every once in a while, we do have a case that involves one of the Planning and Zoning Commission members, and they abstain from that case. And that's the reason for that 1 vote on this one.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it, I was going to say, because a lot of applicants, a lot of commission members on P and Z are, as you say, they're required to be in unincorporated. So it's not overly unusual that we have someone who has an interest and abstains. I mean, that's I wouldn't say it happens regularly, but it's it's minorly unusual. Is that about right, Mr. Jones?
I would agree. That happens, a few times a year, but not every agenda has that.
Very good. With that, if the applicant is present and would like to speak on this matter,
Hi, my name is Chris Higgins, owner and operator of the property. I also sit on the board of Planning and Zoning Commission. I take great pride in volunteering my time on that committee. It's been interesting and fun. I've been on it for almost 5 years now. When I am in development, and so I do see this occasionally, maybe 1, 2 a year. I do have clients which I also abstain, which is the next case coming up. I abstain from any kind of vote on that as well. So other than that, if you guys have any questions, I know you guys have a tough job. I appreciate what you guys do because I sit at the lower level of that and see what comes in sometimes. So
can you give us an idea of because I see of what's going to be done with each lot and kind of give us an idea so that we get some framework?
it'd be 3 homes, basically just 1 home on each lot. The front 2 are currently pending approval from Planning and Zoning and the commissioners. The back lot I haven't even listed on the real estate market yet, just due to the fact that we didn't want to start on building the driveway back in there until we had approval from commission. So other than that, it's ideally I looked at the back lot for my personal residence for a short time. Don't really want to build another house, but it's such a beautiful lot. I think somebody building back there on the west side of the big pond there. It created a lot of issues with the water because our current county codes do not allow splitting water. This was done way prior to my time. With the big lot was, I think it was a family farm at one time of almost 200 acres, and they gave each child 40 acres. They split it down before the county had codes to not allow splitting the water. So it made it a little bit creative, but we also don't want to have uniform lots as well, piano-style hinge lots. So it gives a little character to the area, and the surrounding neighbors seem to really like what we've done there. So.
Right, so that we're not talking about any kind of a subdivision or anything like that.
No.
That's something that, in the past that I've had some concerns about is suburban tile subdivisions in unincorporated Clay County. I think that, and that's the reason I asked that question. I'll probably ask it,
Right.
From here on out because I have concerns about some of the issues that are raised in those kind of situations, but it is not the case in this particular
and with our county overlay district layout here, on the 20 acres in the back, it could never be subdivided again, due to the fact that it has no road frontage that's going to be fed by an ingress-egress easement. It only allows for 1 home to ever be built back there, so it could never be subdivided again.
Commissioner Thompson, do you have any questions or comments?
I don't, thank you.
Commissioner Carpenter?
I do not, thank you.
Very well. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to comment on this particular issue present? Mr. Jones, I'm looking through here, were there any comments that were in opposition to this proposed action?
No, we did not receive any letters or comments during the Planning and Zoning Commission. And Commissioner Nolte, you might remember, this is actually in an area where we had an application for an RV storage facility here on this lot just to the south of it off 92 Highway.
Mm-hmm.
And during that process, the neighbors indicated that they wanted large lot residential in this area. And we believe that's what we're doing with that, with this subdivision. And I think that's the reason we have not had opposition.
So it's not only is there no opposition, but there is a history of past applications coming forward, and the expression of the local residents is that this, if I'm understanding you correctly, and do let me know if I'm not understanding you correctly, but that it sounds as though this is the sort of a thing that past expressions from local residents is exactly what they're wanting to see in this area. Is that reasonable characterization?
Yes, in fact, we've had letters of support on previous cases because we had subdivided this lot to the south in almost a very similar manner, and then this lot that was proposed as the RV storage facility, after it was denied, it was eventually subdivided as well, and the neighbors supported both of those cases.
Okay. Are there any follow-up questions from the commission? Due to the lack of any opposition that we are aware of, is it I don't have a problem with putting this on consent. Is there any comment from the commission on that?
No, I'm fine with that.
I support putting it on consent.
Very well. We will place 2021, 189, 190, and 191 on for consent at our next meeting. By the way, as we proceed, because there are a number of people here, I just want to make the point as far as our procedures go. Today's meeting, as we go through regular agenda, we will be putting items either on the consent agenda or on the regular agenda. Consent agenda will be considered at our next meeting as a group. Everything we put on there will be in that bucket, so to speak. Regular agenda will be discussed as an individual item, and any commissioner can have any item removed from our consent agenda onto regular agenda as we go forward. So while it's a way of streamlining our procedures, if there is no expenditure of money and no controversy, there's always the option for a commissioner who has a concern to have that dealt with by considering these as individual items. That said, we will now proceed to 2021, 192, and 193. Mr. Administrator.
Commissioners, 2021-192 and 2021-193 is a request to approve a subdivision replat of Lot 6 of Apex Acres. There's a zoning order and a final plat to be considered, and Planning and Zoning has further comments.
Please proceed.
Kip Jones, Planning and Zoning Manager. This is a rezoning and final plat. The reason it's not a preliminary plat is this property has been platted before. It's, to me, very similar to the case we just heard. It's approximately 36 acres outlined in the yellow. This is Quinn Road to the east, 168th Street to the south and west, and then E Highway even farther south. It's up near Smithville Lake, obviously surrounded by the lake. That's core property in the green. I'm going to zoom in. So we're talking about lot sizes that are similar to the previous case. We're taking the 36 acres, subdividing it into 3 lots. As soon as it updates here, Lot 6A is a 5-acre lot. It's a little bit odd shaped. Part of the reason for that is, as Mr. Higgins mentioned with the previous case, we typically don't want to go through ponds with property lines because it just creates issues in the future. So we had to skirt around that pond. So this lot would be zoned R5, which is the zoning for 5 to 10 acres. The lot 6B is approximately 11 acres, would be zoned R1, has a pond on it that would be included in the agricultural land preservation. So the 2 front lots would have the ALP areas, and then the back lot, again, is 20 acres, does not have to have the ALP, does not have road frontage, but would be served by a 60-foot wide easement for access. As with the previous case, this is located in the natural resources tier, which allows the 5+ acre lot with the agricultural land preservation. This case, since it is a rezoning, was noticed in the Courier Tribune, and adjacent property owners were sent certified letters. This property is located in an area that's indicated to have a trail, so we are proposing to put a 15-foot recreational easement within the 30-foot utility easement along the frontage of the property. This has the same 5 rezoning criteria as the previous case that is shown in the transmittal that review and decision-making bodies should consider with any rezoning application. The applicant has received all their outside agency approvals. The ponds have been inspected and were noted that they are low hazard Class A ponds with dam structures that are in good condition, which will have little or no potential effect for downstream developments. So this case has been heard by the County Commission before. So it was heard in December of 2020, the exact same case. It was approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission and denied by the County Commission. The Land Development Code requires that the applicant wait 6 months before reapplying. The applicant waited those 6 months and resubmitted this application. We did receive opposition during the first case. We did not receive opposition for this case leading up to Planning and Zoning Commission or during the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. However, we did receive several letters of opposition after the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. And I believe those were included in the packet that was given to the commissioners. I do want to mention there is a pipeline. You can see it on the lot to the north. There's a 60-foot, actually, I'm not sure if it's 60 foot, a pipeline easement that runs just north of it, and it just barely catches the far north east corner of our lot. This is where that 60-foot wide ingress-egress easement is coming. So we added a condition that basically says the Mid-American Pipeline, and it is a 60-foot easement. We just need confirmation from them that the pipeline easement can be within that ingress-egress easement. I don't see that being a problem, but we added it as a condition just to cover that. So we kind of addressed it with the previous case, but I do want to address a couple issues that were stated in some of the opposition letters. The first one being that there's some of the neighbors brought up covenants or HOA requirements, and I just want to make it clear that planning and zoning does not enforce covenants or HOA restrictions. So we don't keep those on record, and we don't enforce those. And as with the previous case, Mr. Higgins is the applicant for this case. The Planning and Zoning Commission did vote 4-0 to 1 to recommend approval. It was 4 to approve, 0 to deny, and then Mr. Higgins did abstain from this case as well. There are several conditions listed in Exhibit A, and I would be happy to answer any questions that the commissioners may have.
Thank you very much. I do have one question. Looking at the map, if you could go back, the yellow area north of 6B, a very long strip, is that just a function of the outline being there, or is there in fact a long strip there that is included in the in 6C? So I'm just trying to, visually it's a little bit confusing, so if you could clarify that a little bit.
Yeah, so this strip here is actually included with the back lot 6C, and then it stops short of the road frontage. And then this dashed line here is everything on the inside of that is the 60-foot wide easement. The thinking there, I think, was that if we give this to the back lot, they would veer their driveway over into this area, even though they could use this for their driveway if they needed to, because we put that easement there. But we thought it may just cut down on the confusion or them using this property all the way to the back for their access.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that does clarify a little bit. And as I say, from the printouts and from the smaller version of that, it was a little bit difficult to decipher, so I wanted to make sure that we had that clarified. Okay. By the way, before I'm going to go ahead and open it up to other commissioners. We were just handed an email weighing in on this. Something I want to point out is that I've gotten a number of emails, and I suspect the other commissioners have. I just want to assure everybody that those emails that were sent to us as individual commissioners have been, in fact, distributed to all commissioners. So, in fact, this is one that was, I believe we all had this in an email, and it's just been distributed in a hard copy form. So I would like just to assure citizens that their views on this will be taken into account. So commissioners, I believe, are going to have both electronic and hard copies of comments, either in opposition or in support. So with that said, Commissioner Thompson, did you have anything you would like to ask of Mr. Jones?
Thank you. Yes, I have one question. Mr. Jones, can you let me know, I'm looking at some of these properties here, and it looks like, I'm just trying to see what the average scale of the lots are, and have any of them been previously divided?
And are you talking about lots in the area? Or?
Yes.
Okay, yeah,
Yes.
let me zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to take the aerial off, and if I turn on the zoning, I think it'll show it better. So this is an area that we've actually seen quite a few subdivisions similar to this, and I'll point those out to you. Just give my map is a little bit slow, so just bear with me. So anything that is kind of this light green color is zoned agricultural. Those tend to be the bigger lots, like this lot is 30 acres. This lot, 27. And then when you get into the lots that have the different colors, those are the lots that are zoned residential, and those tend to be the ones that have been subdivided in the past. So if we go down here just to the south, this is a 13-acre lot, 13. This is a subdivision that we did a few years ago. This is an 8-acre lot, a 5-acre lot, 5. Then you get into a bigger piece that's 77. But all of these that say POD, that's that agricultural land preservation that we talk about. So you know those have been recently subdivided. This one's a 10 or 11-acre lot, 10 to 11 acres. This is another recent subdivision that we did, Dillon Hills, 7-acre lot. And then if you don't see the POD, but they're shaded a different color, this is an older subdivision that was done, a little bit less than 5 acres. And then it's surrounded by some larger, so it's kind of really a mix of large acreages and then smaller lots that have already been subdivided. And you can see even some smaller ones up to the north that are 3 to 4 acres that are next to a 77-acre lot.
That's all I have.
Okay. Commissioner Carpenter, do you have any questions of Mr. Jones?
I do not, thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, we will hear from the applicant, and then we will hear from any other citizen who cares to comment on this issue. So please proceed.
Yeah, Chris Higgins. I'm representing John and Annette Riley Foster. On the first case that they brought through, I wasn't the representation. They were clients of mine. I have a real estate company. I've sold their stuff in the past, so I abstained from the vote. They took it through themselves. Not really sure what happened. I know Commissioner Nolte was here. I think we had some opposition from Commissioner Ridgway, which was, to me, I'm not really sure. And I think Commissioner Nolte was asking for some more information, which we got to him. It was a little too late. They'd already closed the case, so that's why we had to wait 6 months to come back. I offered to help him bring it through this time. Again, it's we do have some opposition from the next door neighbors. One of them that really seems to be throwing the biggest fit is ironic because she subdivided the 25 acres into 2 12s, to have her piece, and so it's a bit hypocritical. But I look at it as we follow the county, rules on moving forward. Hope to meet all the criteria. One thing I will say is that our county lays things out really nicely. I've enjoyed sitting on the commission. I've done other land division splits in Platte County, Clinton County, Smithville. There's always snags in those. They don't put everything out in front, so you don't know what to look for, and they always catch you in a loop and try to extort you in different ways. The thing I like about Clay County is that we put everything in the conditions and reports, and our land preservation and our codes are there in black and white, and so you try to, when you try to set these up, you don't have to come back and do this again. This is a problem that uniformity is what we seek, and I think Clay County does an absolute fantastic job with that. Kip Jones and his team are just a wonder to work with. They really are great. But other than that, if you guys have any questions, I do have one thing to add. So we did the big yellow line at the top there. There was a 15-foot or 30-foot easement there. Water District Number 9 did reach out to me and ask if they could bump that out to 60 due to the impact of the pipeline easement, and that's why we did. That was the only thing that we changed in this one. We did move that from a 30 to 60-foot ingress utility easement. And then other than that, and it should take care of the problem down there by the pipeline that cuts the corner just barely. Other than that, I'm answering any questions y'all may have.
I appreciate your comments about our process, and I would point out that not only is it make it more conducive for someone who is contemplating any of these types of actions, but my hope is that it also allows a broader amount of information for citizens, either in opposition or in support, to be able to express that opinion in as informed a manner as possible. So certainly, the open system that we're trying to cultivate here is I think, lends itself to the best decision-making that we can in these kinds of issues, particularly if there's controversy attached. I think it's all the more important that everybody, to the degree possible, understand what the ground rules are going forward. Could you go ahead and just give us an idea of the purposes you'll be putting these lots to, a little bit like you did on the last
Yeah,
issue?
absolutely. So we did pre-list these with pending approval from planning and zoning. So the two larger lots, a young couple had made the offer on the house in 11 acres. We agreed to on that, again, pending approval from planning and zoning. Their parents were buying the 20-acre tract back behind them. They are actually going to not build back there. The parents are probably just going to turn the land over to the kids. And so it's actually going to probably remain one big lot there. The 5-acre lot is also pending contract for a new home build. They've all amazingly hung in there for almost 7 months to get through this process again, which is really nice because they're believing in the process as well. So we're looking at one additional house build on this 37 acres roughly. Other than that, there's really not much to it. We're just basically splitting off the 5 acres so the family member is buying the other 20 back behind the house. The kids did move into the house. They're renting it right now. The owners are in Arizona sitting patiently waiting for 7 months to be able to buy a house down there. They need their funds from this place to make their move. But other than that, it's we're talking one additional home.
And that was kind of where I was going. As with the last issue, we discussed the idea of density. And, to tell you the truth, when we see some of these issues come up, if there's a subdivision involved, sometimes the people in the immediate vicinity have very deep concerns about the population density and the compatibility with their existing property. So that's why I asked that question, is to sort of make sure that we have that
No,
aired.
I agree 100%, and this is going to be a very low density.
Is there any question from anyone on the commission? Any comments?
I just want to confirm, so by moving that easement to 60 instead of 30, that is, there will be 0 issues with that pipeline?
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
running through
the
additional
only thing,
property.
we haven't heard back from the pipeline yet, and if they want additional easement there, we're more than happy to give that to them.
Okay.
Right now, we've got a 60-foot, which takes it outside of right on the edge of their easement line. So if they have an issue, we can come down a little further and create an angled driveway into that with no problem. But Kip could
And
probably.
if I may, this line here shows where that easement just barely touches that property. So there's still got to be 45 feet here. If they come back and say that easement can't be, the ingress egress easement can't be there, we would just bump it a little farther to the south. But 60 feet is really overkill on somebody getting their driveway in. Their driveway's not going to be 60 feet wide.
There's
gonna be-
currently a telephone pole there too, or a power line pole there as well, so that we wouldn't build right there in that corner anyway, so, if they decide to do so.
Thank you.
I will ask, if you guys have any questions for me, please ask now. Unfortunately, I will not be able to make it at 6 p.m. next Wednesday. I will be out of town, but I would be more than happy to answer any questions. If you think of anything, feel free to call me back up.
That being said, I don't know what your schedule is, but if we know in advance, perhaps we could arrange some kind of have you conference call in
Yeah,
or something
absolutely.
like that.
And I would be more than willing to set in a conference call if you need to next Wednesday. I would be available for that.
I would just ask, staff to maybe look into that and check the possibilities, so that if it is that event, once again, I want to make sure everybody has every opportunity.
Absolutely.
Carpenter, you're good? I'm good. Okay. With that, thank you. We will now hear from any other citizen who would like to comment on this. There is no particular order, opposition, or support, or just informational. So if any citizen who has a comment would like to comment, please come forward. With this, as any other issues where we have citizen comments, please make sure the light is green on the microphone. Please speak into the microphone and identify yourself for the audio recording so we have the ability to know who we're talking to. So are there any citizens who would like to comment on this issue at this time? Okay, seeing none. It's my thought, are there any closing comments from the commissioners or questions?
No, thank you.
In spite of the fact that we have no one here who is commenting in opposition in light of the number of letters and emails that we got, I think it is prudent to put this on for regular next session, if that is the will of the commission.
I would be fine with that, sure.
Okay. With that, we will put 2021, 192, 193 on for regular for our next meeting next Wednesday. Thank you very much. That brings us, that brings us to 2021, 161, Mr. Administrator.
Commissioners, 2021-161 is a request to approve a conditional use permit for St. Mary's Home for Mothers. This has been previously discussed. I think everybody knows the circumstances.
Thank you very much. I would like to point out as we begin to, as we take up consideration for this issue, that in fact the record has been closed, so we will not be accepting additional testimony. We've had 2 weeks of testimony. We will now make this we will have a discussion between the commission on how to address this particular issue. With that, I've looked through this, and I would like to recommend to the commission 3 additional changes, or 3 changes to what we have in front of us here. I'll go ahead and go through all 3 changes, and then we can either take them up as a group or take them up individually, depending on what the preference of the other commissioners are. Very briefly, I am recommending that we go from a 15-year time period to a 5-year time period, or somewhere in that range. I would also recommend that we establish a requirement to have fencing around the pond area that's on there, and also the frontage for safety reasons, among others. And I would also recommend that we adopt a limitation of 15 residents, excluding those persons under 1 year of age. I think that is it's important because obviously the function of this particular facility is for these expectant mothers to give birth, and just at the heart of it, giving birth should not be a reason for eviction from your residence. So those are the 3 recommendations that I would put forward. The way we would proceed is have discussion on those items, express the will of the commission to the staff, and then we would take it up for final consideration at our next meeting unless there's other direction from the commission. So with that, Commissioner Carpenter, do you have any thoughts on either the 3 points I put forward, or do you have your own issues that you would like to have addressed?
Thank you. So those are some of the issues that occurred to me as well that needed addressing. I do have a question on the occupancy question. The classification of group home that this will operate under limits it to 15 people, right? You mentioned, not counting children under the age of 1. So the question would be for you as well as County Council, whether or not there's any precedent for that, or whether we understand whether or not we can not count children under the age of 1 toward that 15-person occupancy limit and still be within the law.
If you would like to address that, Mr. Counselor.
Yeah, I think obviously the 15-person requirement is one we need to be very aware of. The definition of a person isn't set forth clearly in some of the statutes. I did, when I was looking at it, I thought the original approach of 5 years old, as I recall, felt somewhat arbitrary, because clearly those are children residing in in the location. Keeping it to under one before, or at least one before you start to count them, seems to make some sense to me as well, particularly where the purpose of the home would be for mothers to have children. It would seem somewhat counterproductive for a mother to have that child and then immediately trigger that they have to leave the residence because maybe it went from 15 to 16 with that birth. But at the same time, so it does feel like that it seems reasonable that some consideration be given for those newborns. Given where it is and given the type of home that it is, I think I'm reasonably comfortable with that.
I'd like to add to that. One of the things that struck me as far as the logic that I worked through on this was that the difference between, say, for the sake of argument, a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old is a 5-year-old. Anybody who has had children can tell you 5-year-olds are entirely mobile. And corralling them is not always the easiest thing. A 1-year-old or someone who is under 1 year old is generally going to be obviously much more stationary. They are dependent upon, in fact, their parent to take them from one place to another. So it was the idea that a resident be somebody who is actively, autonomously moving through the facility. Obviously, someone who is 6 to 9 months old does not have that ability. So I think the idea that we would, in fact, count any, say, siblings seemed logical just from that point of view of the use of the facility.
Totally, and if I could say, I agree, it sounds very logical, and kind of Council's point about we wouldn't want, when the birth happens, and that's the whole purpose of the home, obviously we wouldn't want to have a setup to where it triggers that somebody would have to like move out in those circumstances. I wouldn't choose to set it up that way. I guess I just want to make sure that we're not, we've used the word arbitrary in terms of at the age of 5. I want us to have some confidence that this is, going to be in compliance with the planning and zoning codes that define group homes and how many people can live there and what type of group home are eligible for a CUP and what aren't, right? I assume being in compliance is probably a helpful thing.
That's what we want to be. I'm way more comfortable with this iteration, if this is the direction of the commission, than I was the initial iteration.
Thank you. One other question on the fencing. You mentioned fencing around the pond. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think there was discussion about that. If you could have a bunch of kids on the property, that the neighbor who has the primary portion of the pond would perhaps be more comfortable with fencing. And you mentioned along frontage as well. So could you clarify, other than the pond, where you're envisioning?
Right. My thought process on that was that there would be a gate to get in and out, but the idea of having fencing that would do the entire frontage where it would actually access the road seemed to have similar safety concerns, so that, again, if there are children, and as I say, somebody has a 5-year-old child, mobility is not an issue for a 5-year-old, and so having some kind of a barrier before they would approach an area that could be potentially dangerous, I think is a good thing.
Thank you.
Commissioner Thompson, do you have any comments or questions or any additional points that you would like to raise as possible conditions?
No, thank you, Commissioner. I agree with these changes being made. The big aspect I'm really concerned about is the safety of these mothers and these children in this home. So I think the fencing is definitely a must. I'm not quite sure what that looks like just around the pond. I don't know if it needs to be a little more area in the backyard. Children wander, they're curious. My 4-year-old wanders, I will just be in the neighbor's yard. he screams at the other children.
He doesn't have any mobility issues, does he?
He does not. No. So that's my big concern is like, how can we keep these mothers and these children safe? If we're going to be doing them justice, we want to make sure we're putting them in an environment where they will not be harmed. I don't know if we need to. I'm all for the 5-year CUP. I don't know. I want to make sure that these requirements for the safety aspects are being put and being met, and I have no doubt that they wouldn't be. But I think we just have to do our job and make sure that they are. I don't know if we should have them come back in a year. I don't know how long it's going to take for all this to get up and running.
I would, my thought process on that is that we have, although we don't have this particular kind of facility, but that it would fall into the general regulatory enforcement and observation that Mr. Jones and that department engages in anyway. So it would be kind of in the normal course, nothing unusually stringent, but certainly nothing less stringent, but just basically within the mainstream. By the way, to pick up on your point about the fence, you are absolutely right. I mean, if it ends right at the water's edge, it needs to kind of come. Now, what that magic number of distance is, I'm not entirely sure, and I'm certainly open to hear. But yeah, it seems like we would need to go along the property line. And once again, this is not only for the safety of the individuals living there, but it is also, I think, a way of respecting the property of the individual who is adjacent to that. So I think that kind of a thing is a win-win. It shows, I think consideration for both sides of the property line, so to speak. As far as any kind of distance beyond, so once it hits the property line, and then sort of the side things, I hadn't really considered what if there is a standard in that realm or not, but I do see the logic in it.
If I may jump in, just so I'm clear, maybe I'll look for some help from Kip on this as well. It seems to me that I want to make sure that I'm understanding it. I don't think we're talking about fencing around the pond, because the pond primarily sits on the neighbor's land, and the neighbor may not want to fence around his pond. I think what we're saying is we want to fence the entire north boundary, the entire west boundary of the property. As I recall, Kip, the west boundary, the pond kind of falls roughly in the middle of that west boundary, so the fencing would not end right around the pond. Is that fair? And then the second part of that is, I think it would be important, as I recall, there's a small portion of the pond that is actually on this property. I think the fencing should be that the pond should not be accessible. The fencing should, no part of the pond should be inside the fence. That the fence should be separate from, the pond and the fence should be separate. Does that make I'm not saying it the way I want to, but is that make sense?
I think you're right, Mr. Counselor, in that, yeah, we're not proposing that the fencing be put up on the adjacent person's property, but
Right.
solely on the property that we are talking about. And yeah, maybe it should go to that entire, what is it, the western border?
The western
property line?
length of the property is my understanding.
So yeah, Mr. Jones, if you could go ahead and weigh in on that particular point.
So, yeah, we would not want the fence to go through the pond because there's a small portion of the pond that sits, per the survey, on the St. Mary's parcel. So we
That's
would
right.
want the fence to basically exclude the pond from access from the St. Mary's parcel.
Yeah, contiguous fence excluding the pond.
Yes.
Right, that's why I think it should be too.
Thank you for the clarification, because you're right, that is an important point, and thank you for raising that, Commissioner Thompson.
So I have to follow up on that. So will the fencing go around the property then, and then around the pond? I'm a visual person, so I'm trying to figure this out. Because my child would go around that fence and get into that pond. I know what he would do.
Maybe this would be helpful. Mr. Jones, do you, on this, do you have an aerial map of the property so that we might be able to visualize that more easily? And I don't know if we really need a laser pointer or anything like that, but certainly at least this way we're all looking at the same map and understanding what we're talking about.
So this is the property right here.
Kip, are there any current fences around the property?
I'm not aware of any.
Okay.
And the other thing is, of course, the type of fence. Obviously, if it was like a split rail fence, that does not slow down a youngster. So we're talking about something that would in fact be a barrier.
And Kip, if I may, on the what would be the southwest corner, that discoloration there, are those woods or ravine, or what is that?
Yes, that's either a wooded area or brushy area.
Is that a natural barrier, or how dense is that?
Gosh, it's been a while since I've been out there. I remember it being pretty dense because even as you look this way, you can see the water, but you don't see the pond that great.
Right. Yeah, so the question is, to Commissioner Thompson's question, either on the southwest corner or the northeast corner, which is currently, if we do just those two sections of fencing, how likely is it, or is it that a younger child might kind of exit that fencing and then head towards the pond? I think that's the question. Right. And you think that it's kind of a natural barrier there on the southwest as far as some, the trees in the woods?
Yeah, I believe if a fence was put here, you would have to cross that fence and then go through some woods to get on this side of the pond.
Okay.
And there are huge differences in types of fencing. The county has some fencing requirements like around pools. That's a more restrictive, where it has to be at least 4 foot tall, has to meet the fall guidelines in the building code where the spindles can't be more than 4 inches apart, where you can crawl through. So that could be a consideration as well.
Any idea how far that western length is from top to bottom?
Roughly 870 feet.
So that's 870 feet. So from the bottom, they're probably doing a 300-foot walk around the fence in the woods to get back up to the pond.
Yeah, roughly 300 to 400 feet.
Okay.
Does it make sense to enclose the whole property?
That's a judgment call. That's certainly something that could be considered.
I think my concern is that it becomes a little bit more of a difficult hill to climb, so to speak. What I'm looking at when I see that map is I'm not seeing particular hazards on the east or the south. I'm also seeing a lot more distance. So if, again, my experience as a parent and a grandparent tell me that once the young child starts tearing off across, or say they were going south, you've at least got the territory to catch up with them. Whereas the hazard on the north and the west are much more immediate, so you don't have as much time to get to the child, if that's the situation you're in. So I see the hazards being much more close on those two borders myself. And it would take how far is it, Mr. Jones, from the residence to, say, the closest point on the eastern border?
Roughly 400 feet.
400 feet's a long ways for a little kid to run. And I'm perfectly capable of believing they can run that, but it would require a more extended time of being not observed, I guess is what I'm saying. Whereas if you went the other direction to the pond or say even the property line, you're looking at a much shorter timeline to catch the child, and they're much more capable of running that distance. What's that distance, Mr. Jones?
That from the back driveway to the pond, to the water's edge, is roughly 280-ish feet.
Okay, so a little bit more than half the distance. That's and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to strike a balance between reasonable safety concerns and not putting in a fence around the entire thing, which could be a heavier cost to bear as far as going forward. So I'm trying to weigh those concerns, and I'm open to hear that. I'm just trying to look at it on the practical aspect of it, and that is to ensure the safety to the degree possible.
No, and I completely understand. As a mother, I have concerns of safety issues, and I know what my child is capable of.
Yeah.
And I would think the cost of putting in additional fencing to keep children safe, and also being respectful of the other property owners and keeping the children in that area seems to be a good balance to me. So.
And the thing is, what I'm looking at is, say we're talking about a swimming pool, a very compact area compared to this, which is pretty vast. So, yeah, I mean, I think the fencing is most critical on the north and the west. I don't think it's as critical on the south and the east, but I'm prepared to entertain
Commissioner,
the
if I could weigh in.
otherwise. Commissioner Carpenter, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Cheers, thank you. Well, I just, in terms of what we require in the CUP here, I think that my 2 cents is that doing that with the northern and western boundary as a requirement is what makes sense. And if the applicant decides to do the southern or eastern border, I would rather leave that as an optional choice. I also don't, I think we heard from the property owner to the south. My recollection is that the property owner immediately to the south was in favor of the applicants, and I'm not even sure that they would want a fence along to divide the property line, and so I don't want us to require fencing there. It's obviously an additional significant expense for the applicant as well. So my 2 cents is the northern and western border in terms of requirement.
I think that is, while any person who owns property has the ability to put fencing up, I think that's a good point, and that is the concerns of the neighbors on those two other compass directions as well. So I'm kind of inclined to do that. One of the aspects of this is that the people who are running this are, and any person who's running an operation involving children is, of course, going to be concerned with their safety. But I think these individuals are certainly in that heightened awareness of safety for children. I'm kind of inclined to go with the north and south. The north and west. I'm a little bit concerned about putting too onerous an expense and not being able to realize the return on safety, because, excuse me, if a child were to take off running to the east, they don't run into a hazard. They're certainly on someone else's property, and that is certainly not something that we would want to see. But the danger part, aside from just falling into a ravine or something, is, into a. I don't want to. I'm trying not to heighten. Having been a parent, my paranoia radar goes up when we're talking about the safety of children. But there is less apparent hazard. There's less obvious hazard in that direction, whereas there is an absolute hazard either on the street or in a body of water. The only other thing I can think is what type of fencing we would be recommending. I'm thinking, we need to just to recommend at least the, I guess, bare minimum adequacy, and I don't mean to say that in a way to diminish the safety of it, but I just think something that will be a sufficient barrier to contain a child is pretty much, we wouldn't want to exceed that, because I think that would make no difference and just add unnecessary expense to the process.
Yeah, I think Mr. Jones had some potential language there that he could offer on that.
Very good.
For next week. We don't have to arrive on it today.
Exactly. I just wanted to make the point and give and make sure that we were giving sufficient instruction to staff that they felt comfortable going down that road. So further.
Is there consensus on that?
This
On those
is- yeah, I was-
three items?
Yeah, on those three items, is there any, and again, to go back to the fencing issue, to just restate, that would be the north and east, western borders is, and then I think the others we pretty much worked out. Is that acceptable as far as putting forward our conditions for next week's consideration?
I'm fine with them.
Okay.
Oh, yes, I support those amendments to the CUP.
So if I may just work.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I think what you're saying is, as I'm looking at 161, is that condition number 2 will be shortened from 15 to 5. So we can make that change. We will add 2 new conditions, so 15 and 16. Condition 15 will be the condition on fencing on the north and west and adequate fencing, and not to include any portion of the pond on the house side of that property. And then 16 is to limit this to 15 residents over the age of 1 year, 1-year-old. Those are the 3 that I'm hearing so far. I'm just trying to track them as we go.
Does, and that confirms what the commissioners are agreeable to. Before we go with any other potential conditions, I just want to ask staff, is staff comfortable with the level of direction that would be given with the information at this point?
Yes, absolutely.
I would then ask if any commissioners would like to bring up any other possible additional conditions or any changes in those that are listed before we go forward. Anything else that would like to be added or possibly deleted from what we have on outlined in 161? Commissioner Carpenter?
No, other than a brief question, did the applicant have the current conditions in the proposed CUP, did the applicant have any issues with any of those proposed items that they felt that they would be unable to meet? I don't recall any. I'm just seeking clarity on that.
I don't recall any particular, objection or anything that would be essentially a deal killer. So my understanding is that your memory is correct.
Okay. So yeah, in that case, the changes that we're making, I think, are exactly the correct ones in terms of the safety, the number of years, and the residency, especially if we're confident that going that direction on the residency limitation is going to be acceptable, then I think it makes sense to me.
Okay. I was going to say this, while this has in the past had some controversy and we are making changes, to that degree, my instinct is to go to a regular agenda item on that. Is that good with the other commissioners?
Yes.
Very well. And I'm also confident that staff feels they have sufficient time to make these changes for our next meeting. Is that correct? Sure. Very good. That concludes, so we will be putting 2021-161 on next week's regular agenda. That brings us to another grouping, and while they are not bracketed, it's my understanding that 2021 ordinance 26, 27, and 28 are very similar issues, and it might be a more efficient use of our time to combine those 3 items. Is that
Yes.
Is that acceptable to the other commissioners? Very well. It appears to be so. Mr. Administrator, if you would proceed.
Commissioners, ordinances 2021, 26, and 27, and 28 are to reappropriate and revise the adopted budget for the current year for the family courts. This has to do with grants that come from the same source and are coming from the same funds. And Jenny Riggs with Family Court is here to add additional comments.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Jenny Riggs, and I'm here on behalf of Family Court to present 3 grants to you for approval. These are under the Supreme Court of Missouri Domestic Relations Resolution Fund, and they are funding different pilot programs that we are running to speed up the resolution of family court issues. One is child abuse neglect cases. If we can establish paternity or establish a custody agreement we can resolve those cases sooner. And the other is a domestic mediation program for high conflict, domestic violence, those type of situations. We can contract with, the judges can order mediation in those cases, and we can usually bring the parties to a more peaceful resolution than having a contested custody issue in court. And the third is our parenting court resource program, where we are providing fathering classes for our fathers who are behind on child support, because we know that the more they are engaged with their children and developing a healthy co-parenting relationship with the other parent, the custodial parent, the more likely they are to adhere to their child support obligations. And we've branched that out into some more capacity building programs in the community, where we're organizing sort of a weekly Dad's Cafe, along with Easter Seals and some of the other serving younger parents in the community. So those are our three. The fiscal year for the state court is July 1st. So we're here on behalf of the first half of the grant, and then I will come back to you in January and ask you to approve the second half of that fiscal year.
Well, thank you. I mean, we are getting grant money to do good work. What more can we ask? This is very good news, and we're certainly accustomed to hearing that from you and the folks that you're working with, that we are able to obtain these grants for the I think great purposes that you have outlined. Commissioner Carpenter, do you have anything you'd like to ask? Or
No, just thank you for the information, and congratulations on getting the grant money. That sounds fantastic.
Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you. No, thank you guys for coming up and doing this. How many years have you guys been doing these grants? They've been numbers of years.
The relationship with the Family Court Commission and the Domestic Resolutions Fund has been going as long as we've had a family court. So many, many years. Each year they come up with new priorities, new program initiatives that they are wanting. And some of the work that we're doing here, I know Commissioner Nolte likes to hear this, is a model for other circuits. So it's very nice that we have the support of our judiciary, our contract service providers, our staff, and you, that we're able to promote these initiatives that actually improve court services across the state.
Great.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is there any citizens who would care to comment on this issue? Seeing none. Clearly good news and non-controversial, so it would be my recommendation we put this on for consent, if that is consistent.
I agree.
Very good. That brings us to 2021 Ordinance 29, which, while similar, did not quite fit into a grouping with the previous three items. Mr. Administrator.
Commissioners, as you said, Mr. Commissioner, this is another request to reappropriate and revise an adopted budget. It is slightly different than the three that were previously, while the purpose is the same, it is slightly different. It comes from a different fund than the previous three that we talked about, and Ms. Riggs is here to add additional comments.
Please proceed.
Again, this is a little bit along the same lines of promoting initiatives that, in this case, meet the goals of reducing juvenile detention by providing alternatives to detention. In this specific case, this is a Family Court Committee, a grant that provides for electronic monitoring, which means the juveniles who might have a risk of fleeing or a risk of being a public safety issue can be electronically monitored, and that way they can be placed back in the community and balance that public safety risk. We know that putting juveniles in detention can have a dramatic effect on their future chance of reoffending. So what we're hoping to do is, while we can speed up their adjudication and hopefully move them to a disposition pretty quickly, any time they spend in detention is not only expensive, but it has a cost to the child's development. And we have had some 17-year-olds commit horrendous crimes. So we want to save our detention unit for those types of situations where the public safety balance is we have to weigh towards detention. But in other cases, we want to be able to use electronic monitoring.
Thank you. I think this is great for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is by being able to come up with an alternative way of dealing with these juveniles. It gives the opportunity, I think, for the best chance of turning them from offenders into law-abiding citizens. So I think I think it's good to be able to give persons who qualify the opportunity to turn their lives around and to maximize that to the degree possible. Commissioner Carpenter?
No, just again, glad another successful grant application, so fantastic, thank you.
Commissioner Thompson?
Nope, I'll just second that.
Thank you.
Thank you again. More good news. That's one of the reasons we're always so happy to see you. You always always doing good work. That brings us to 2021-167. Mr. Administrator?
Commissioners, 2021-167 is to approve as a sole source vendor Aumentum. This is a tax collection and distribution software, and the collector is here for additional comments.
Please proceed.
We are just requesting approval. We have severely outstanding bills and that need to be paid, so that's all.
Okay. So this is a sole source, and we've got that nailed down, it looks like.
Yeah, and Commissioner, if I may,
Please.
I raised this last week. I've reviewed the issues that I had last week, and I'm comfortable with it.
So you feel comfortable
Yep.
with the sole sourcing status of this issue?
I am.
Very well. Are there any comments from Commissioner Carpenter?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Thompson?
No, thank you.
Very well. This does, of course, have the expenditure of money involved, so my recommendation would be regular. Is that consistent with what the commission would like?
That's fine.
Agreed, thanks.
Very well. By the way, we seem to have a number of them here. Mr. Administrator, if you think we should group any of these, just let me know, but otherwise we'll take them up individually. That brings us to 2021-194. Mr. Administrator.
Commissioners, 2021-194 is to approve, again, contracts for the collection of taxes for cities within Clay County. This particular resolution is for the city of Holt, and the collector has comments.
Please proceed.
This is just another one exactly identical to the ones that we've been sending out. The only comment I would make is in light of some of the things that are going to come up in the next few agenda items, I have been going up and signing any that were executed before July 28th. After that, they become two-party contracts. So unless you guys want Barbara to sign them, then so we can take direction. But other than that, and thankfully the language was already in there. The language said 2023, but it said that they automatically morphed into two-party contracts.
As far as the issue of who signs and all that, I think I would certainly want to hear from staff and council. Are there any issues that raises, even though it doesn't have to do with this particular issue, this particular resolution, I should say? Do you guys have any comments on the way that should fall out as far as signatures go?
Well, it will be approved, assuming it goes on our normal process.
Mm-hmm.
It will be approved approximately 7 o'clock Wednesday, the 28th,
Right.
and you will be the collector until midnight that day.
Well, and
Is that fair?
yes, under our current form of government, I mean, we've been signing them as a formality because we always did, but I don't know that it's anything worth splitting hairs over.
I'm
because,
comfortable with you signing them
Yeah.
if it's approved next Wednesday
But-
night.
It
Very
is
well.
what it
And
is.
then any subsequent agreements from here on out, obviously, will be done under a different
right.
personnel structure.
That's right.
Very good. Commissioner Thompson, did you have any questions or comments?
I don't, thank you.
Commissioner Carpenter?
I do not, thank you.
Seems to me to be appropriate under consent. Is that?
Agreed.
Very well. That brings us to 2021-195. Please proceed.
Commissioners, 2021-195 is to approve an RFP number 4121 for a professional services contract with Archon Information Systems LLC. This is a tax sale due diligence relationship, and the collector has additional comments.
Please proceed.
Yes, thank you. This is the company that has been providing tax sale due diligence services for the county for 5 years. Their services they provide are 100% statutory, so they're not a vendor in the traditional sense, but the state auditor asked us to, dot an I and cross a T, and so we sent it out for RFP, and they were the only respondent.
And although that makes it somewhat a moot point, but have you been satisfied with their performance under our contract?
Yes, I can tell you during COVID, we looked like the smartest county in Missouri
Very good.
because we could still have our sale.
I was hoping that that was the case. I just wanted to confirm and certainly let the public know that that was indeed the case. Commissioner Thompson, do you have any questions or comments?
I don't, thank you.
Commissioner Carpenter?
I do not. Thanks.
May I ask you just a simple question?
Absolutely, please proceed.
Madam Collector, is this, if this contract is approved, will it impact this tax sale or future tax sales? Does this need to be approved for this August tax sale to occur?
Yes, they have been working busy, because they always have for the last 5 years. So, and
Okay.
the tax sale is cyclical, so there's constant duties being done.
I just want to make sure this wasn't
Yeah.
just for, an extension, and this does not impact this year's tax sale. This does impact this year's tax sale.
Well, we would like your approval so that the state auditor would be happy for,
Okay.
this year's tax sale. We want to get the approval on the record, but they've been, doing what
Sure.
they've been doing for years.
Got it.
Okay. This is a renewal. It does obviously involve the expenditures of money. I could go either way as far as consent or regular. Commissioner Thompson, do you have a,
I'm comfortable with consent.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yeah, that's good.
And Commissioner Olson,
Yes.
just because you talked about the expenditures of money, this is one reason why we had not sought a contract before. Every amount of money that is paid to this vendor is billed through a tax bill. There are statutory responsibilities that they take on for us, and we bill them through a tax bill. So we didn't see them as a traditional vendor because it's not a purchase as such. So the people of Clay County can be satisfied that everything that we're paying them is statutorily authorized and demanded and is first attempted to be collected through a tax bill.
Okay, very well. That said, we will, seems to be the consensus of the commission, that 2021-195 go on for consent on our next meeting agenda. That brings us to 2021-198. Mr. Administrator?
Commissioners, I'm going to recommend that we take two resolutions in combination. They are related and overlapping. So 198 and 199 apply to similar issues. 199 is to approve the final annual settlement of the existing incumbent collector. And then 198 is to approve the full quietus of the existing collector, and it is concerned with the final settlement. So I would recommend that you consider 199, which then would allow you to fully consider 198.
Thank you. Yes, I had that in my notes. It was on the page turn, so I'd recognized to go into that issue before I consulted the notes that I'd made earlier. Yeah, that's fine. If there's no objection from the commission, we will proceed along those lines.
Okay, so again, 199 is to approve the existing, the annual settlement of the incumbent collector. And 198, as I said, is to then approve her exit, if you will, after having approved the final settlement.
Okay. Please proceed.
So I have submitted my resignation to the county, and there is a whole list of statutes in RSMO 52 that governs that process, which we've been following and checking with county council. That's all been done. But 139-220 speaks very clearly to a final settlement of whatever monies have been in my hands at that time. And just so you know, the settlement that we have presented is a traditional settlement, which would have been through June 30th and then dispersed on July 25th. On July 28th, when we come back for final approval after you've had an opportunity to review that, we're happy to supplement. We've talked to the auditor about just running some basic reports of exactly what's in the bank accounts at that moment. That's not required as part of this final settlement, but just so that everybody has that. And then those are supposed to be given to to various parties. And so that is $199. We're giving that to you. You have your opportunity to review it and approve it. The full quietus is important to me because I have had a recorded lien on my house for $750,000 for 10 years. The collector's bond is a lien on their real estate. And so the reason I asked for it to be a separate resolution rather than just accepting the final settlement is because I will record that in the record, just that resolution. And using those words from the statute, I believe gives me the best cover for, future title work and to show that that lien has been properly released from my real estate.
I do have a question of council, because these are, I don't have a problem with going consent on these necessarily, but I guess what I'm looking at is just strictly from the compliance. It's not the right word I'm trying to come up with, but from the point of view of, since this is an exit document that is dealing with money, would it be more prudent to put it on regular agenda just to show due diligence that we had examined it, or would consent really, putting on consent not have an effect on that?
Well, I would, I think it's essentially going to be consent. What we want is consent, but I would recommend it be put on regular, simply so we can ask, we will meet at after the close of business next Wednesday and just make sure everything between now and then is everything's okay, so that you guys can then approve it and move on.
So when you're talking about that, you are talking about both of them or just one?
I would keep them together. I would.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also next, on the 28th, and I know you don't do things on immediate action, but if you would not mind connecting it to 199, we are going to run those reports as of the 28th and just supplement or amend. They're not a settlement, but it's just, the balances in the bank account, the balances in all of the various parts of Ascend, those kinds of things, and we can't run those. They're not effective really until that day. So that, and as a matter of fact, we could run them at the close of business since the commission meeting isn't until 6. And that way you guys have a supplemental record of that. And by the way, the auditor has also, part of RSMO 52 says that 3 parties can review all of this, or we can consent to have one do it. And the auditor has reviewed our final settlement, actually recommended one tweak of moving money from one place to another, and has given us an email to that effect that it appears to be in order.
Okay. Questions from the commission? Commissioner Carpenter?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Thompson?
No, thank you.
So what I guess, if this makes a difference, my recommendation would be regular agenda, but to deal with 199 and then deal with 198, so reverse their order on the agenda for next week's meeting. Does that sound reasonable?
Yep. And then I think what I heard is basically a end of the day report will be available at the meeting tomorrow or next Wednesday, just for one last review, and we'll be good.
If all else fails, we could put that on written reports.
Yeah.
Or something, just so it's of record. I think it's just very important for Barbara and I, Barbara being my replacement, that we both have records of all of that kind of stuff, so that there's never any question about anything. So.
If there are no other questions from the commission, is that an acceptable arrangement? Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Very well. So those 2 items, 198 and 199, will go on for regular agenda, and we will take up 199 and then 198 in that order on that, on that agenda. That brings us to 2021-200, Mr. Administrator.
Commissioners, 2021-200 is to approve a new collector's bond for the incoming collector. That will take effect only on the day she becomes official, which will be July the 29th.
Please proceed.
I asked Barbara O'Reilly with the collector's office, soon to be the collector, if approved. I ask that you approve my bond.
Okay. Are there any questions from the commission related to 2021-200?
No, it's a thing that we've got to do to turn over the role here, and looking forward to having Barbara in the role. So.
Commissioner Thompson, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No questions.
Very well. I don't know that I see a problem with putting this on consent. How does staff feel about it first and council before I make a
It
recommendation?
does involve an expenditure of money.
It does. No, you're right. Perhaps regular would be our better bet. It's- Very well. If there are no further comments, then 2021-200 will be on regular agenda. That brings us to 2021-202. Please proceed.
Commissioners, 2021-202 is to approve amended agreements with First Call Technology, Community Care Link, the Community Action Agency of Kansas City, the Kearney Enrichment Council, Metro Lutheran Ministry, the Northland Healthcare Access, the Salvation Army, and the United Way of Greater Kansas City. This is a subgrant of Emergency Rental Assistance Program funding. This is from the auditor's office, and the auditor is available for additional comments.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Victor Holbert, Clay County Auditor. Resolution 2021-202 is similar to what we discussed and how we amended the agreement for our new agency in the last commission meetings with Guadalupe Centers. It essentially is a housekeeping item to reflect new information we got from the Treasury Department concerning our ability with the Emergency Rental Assistance Program to serve Kansas City residents who live in Clay County. So essentially it amends that, as well as the new deadline for the 1.0 money of September 30th, 2022. But let me step through real quickly just the specific changes so you're aware. In section 2 of each MOU, all the MOUs are generally structured the same except for First Call Technologies. They had a different structured one because they're not providing assistance, they are the technology platform for the applications. But in section 2 of all the other MOUs, basically we just changed the language to say that we're serving all of Clay County, that we have 6 nonprofits now instead of 5 administering those dollars. In section 4, mutual commitments, again just saying all of Clay County. In section 6, in the term, we're just saying now it's September 30th, 2022. And section 7, in the funding, I do want to spend a little bit of time here. Initially, we discussed going in 5 rounds for each agency, 130,000 each. I wanted just a little more flexibility in the case that one agency outpaces the others, gets through 655,000 to give them dollars to be able to complete 1.0. We have had that situation where some are moving faster than others, and so that gives that flexibility. Except for in Salvation Army's case, they had an issue just being able to find staff. So we are keeping their amount at the first round only of $131,000. So that's a difference with Salvation Army. Again, also in section 7, we're changing the date to the end of September 30th of 22. We do expect to be out of $1.0 before then, but this is just to update per what Treasury's guidance is. For Kearney Enrichment Council, I do want to address that we added in the administrative section, they were initially $35,000. We added $5,000 at their request for an intern, a temporary intern, and we still have enough admin dollars, that 10% admin dollars to do so.
Please remind us on the administrative costs of dollars. We seem to, as you say, be coming in under that, and then it even allows for the additional expenditures that you just mentioned. Can you give us an idea of where we're at on the administrative costs incurred and committed as compared to what is available to us?
Absolutely. So we've spent about, I just ran the numbers before I came up, about 2%. We have done, for administrative dollars, only expended 84,000. Now we have encumbered per the agencies who have submitted reimbursement requests and in line with their agreement, some $104,000. So leaving 174,000 of the original 10% appropriation of 364,000. And that's why in my RCA, I essentially outlined that there's 174,000 available. and what is the new contracted amount that we've reflected, 160,000. So that leaves, to answer your question, still 14,000 really unobligated for administrative expenses. But I'm pleased that we're really on track. Some folks haven't even submitted reimbursement requests yet, so I've tried to remind them of that. But we want to make sure that we don't find ourselves in a situation. We always want to stay less than 10% of what's been distributed at actual program, consistent, because it's not, you don't spend all of 10% and still have program dollars, and so we're doing that. So that's the case with the administrative dollars.
Thank you. I didn't mean to take you off track, but I thought that was something that might be relevant at that moment.
Yeah, no, that's certainly fine. And as a reminder, we've done, we're at $1.2 million expended so far, so just kind of give you an idea on that. Now, moving on to Northland Healthcare Access, we did make a change with their administrative allocation because of that situation with Salvation Army. We moved some of their administrative budget of $30,000 to Northland Healthcare Access so that they wanted to hire an additional case manager. And so that's what is proposed here. And then with Salvation Army, we left their administration from what had been $42,000 to $12,000, less than $30,000 for, they do have one staffer now, but they're just going to focus for 1.0 on that. And then finally, Section 10, Special Conditions, just making a comment that the most recent FAQ for the rental program is June 24th, not what was in the previous MOU. I plan to bring to you in the next round of meetings the 2.0 agreements, and we wanted to keep them separate. We thought about combining it and trying to knock it all out in one stone, but just for clarity of the funding mechanisms, bring you separate agreements for those. So that is really all that is in Resolution 2021-202. I'm open to any questions. And,
Okay. By the way, just for clarity on this, the original funding was for Clay County outside of the city of Kansas City. One of the reasons that we're making this move is so that we can make sure that we serve as many Clay Countyans as possible. So we're expanding a little bit into areas that may need more help than others. Is that an accurate way to put it?
Yeah, that's correct. The formula, how Treasury indicated in the guidance, was done based on our population outside of Kansas City. But that doesn't mean that we can't serve the overlapping jurisdiction, much like the state of Missouri is serving overlapping jurisdictions through MHDC. Just so long as we don't duplicate and we have those controls in place to do so by using the same technology provider. And again, just to remind, as I discussed last time, this is a really, really good timing to do so because Kansas City closed down their application because they've had so many and they're catching up. And they're getting ready to start the 2.0 program and application. So this is a window of opportunity to help those who are still looking for assistance. We have a CDC eviction moratorium ending next Friday, and it was pushed back a month. So this gives more of an option to serve Kansas Cityans in Clay County who, through no fault of their own because of the pandemic, are behind on their rent. So.
And that's the impact, obviously, as far as Clay County goes, of this change is going to be most felt in the Western District because that's where the majority of Kansas City is. So I think at this point, I'd like to go ahead and open it up for comments. And Commissioner Carpenter, that we're talking about your district here, so I'm sure that you've got some.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I just once again want to extend my sincere gratitude to you for your hard work on this. I think it's makes a lot of sense to open this up to Kansas City, especially being able to work with the same vendor and avoid duplication should be hopefully a pretty streamlined process. So yeah, I think it's fantastic. Thank you.
Commissioner Thompson.
I would just like to echo that. I think you guys are doing a great job, and I'm glad we're able to open this up and help some of that overlapping district and get some of this taken care of, get this money spent, help out people. So thank you.
Are there any comments from anyone? I was going to say we've kind of cleared the room a little bit here. I just want to make sure there's no public comment. As far as consent or regular, Is there, Commissioner Carpenter, what would your thoughts be?
Well, I guess the safe move in terms of complying with our expenditure rule would be to put it on regular. I mean, these are dedicated dollars already, but I'm fine doing it regular if y'all are.
I agree with that, and I think it gives us the added benefit of hearing again from our auditor and perhaps even having some updated information so that we can, and to tell you the truth, so we can maybe further publicize. One of the things that concerns me about this is as Kansas City closes theirs down, Clay County, Kansas City residents may well think that the option is no longer open to them, and we want to make sure that they understand the option is still in effect for them.
Agreed, makes sense.
Commissioner Thompson, does that sound like
that
you're good
sounds
with that? Very well, that will put 2021-202 on next week's agenda, on the regular agenda. That brings us to 2021-196.
Commissioners, 2021-196 is to approve a sole source vendor contract with Thomson Reuters West, and this is for the purpose of purchasing law books and other corresponding services. This is from purchasing, but the auditor is here to add additional comments.
Mr. Auditor, please proceed.
It's Victor Hurlbert, Clay County Auditor. I was asked by our purchasing agent, purchasing manager, Leslie Group, to fill in. Couldn't be here at this time today. I actually won't be able to be here next week, so she might need to fill in for me on that and on the rental program. I'm at auditor training in Jefferson City. But this right here before you is 2021-196, is requesting a sole source vendor be granted to Thomson Reuters West. The reasoning being this was approved last year for the circuit clerk's office and for the courts with resolution 2020-81, and also the sole source justification being that it crosses numerous offices. It's not only used by the circuit clerk, but as well as the collector's office uses a firm to do skip tracing with them and their clear product to basically go after delinquent tax collections. And then I have recently engaged with them as well for the rental program. They have another product called Clear ID Confirm, and it's essentially just to confirm when someone makes application that they are in fact a citizen and they are who they say they are. So because of that kind of cross office purpose, we are seeking that sole source justification. It's good policy to do it annually, and so we're seeking renewal for that so that we have a authorized purchase when we make purchases with one vendor over $6,000 in 90 days, which I believe is going to change here pretty soon to $12,000 because of new legislation. So.
Okay. Are there any questions of the auditor on this issue? Commissioner Thompson?
Thank you.
No, thank you.
And as far as regular consent, is there, Commissioner Thompson, do you have a recommendation on that?
I'm okay with consent on this one, but.
Very well. Commissioner Carpenter, do you concur?
I mean, I'm certainly okay with consent. I mean, this is renewing an expenditure of funds, so just in the spirit of things, it might be better for regular, but I'm perfectly fine with whatever y'all want to do for sure.
Okay. We will do that then. 2021-197, Mr. Administrator.
Commissioners, 2021-197 is to approve the use of some county grounds for the Studio 10 Dance Group to do a Dance for the Cure performance benefit on July the 31st. And Facilities is here with additional comments.
Please proceed.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Donna Kuntz, Deputy County Administrator. This is a request from one of our Liberty business owners to use our Rooney Justice Plaza for July 31st, a evening performance with their dance studio children. This is open to the public. This is a 16th annual fundraiser, Dance for the Cure, that benefits the University of Kansas Cancer Center.
Very good. Are there any questions of the Deputy Administrator on 2021-197?
Thank you.
Very well. Comments from the public? Seeing none. Commissioner Carpenter, do you have a thought as far as consent or regular? What would be your preference? Commissioner
Consent.
Thompson?
That's fine.
Very well. 2021-197 will go on our consent calendar. Thank you. And that brings us to, at long last, our final issue. That is 2021-201. Mr. Administrator.
Commissioners, 2021-201 is to approve RFP 5021, a term and supply contract with Heron Contracting LLC, MTS Contracting, Inc., the Wilson Group, Inc., and Zipco Contracting, Inc. for on-call general contract, excuse me, for on-call general contractor services. And this is from Facilities, who is here for additional comments.
Please proceed.
Donna Kuntz, Deputy County Administrator. This is a term and supply contract that we went out to bid for. These are general on-call services, which means interior construction type projects, concrete. We are recommending that we award the term and supply to all 4 of the vendors that replied to our request.
Okay. Are there any questions from the commission on this issue?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Thompson? Okay. Being a contract, what is the preference as far as regular or consent agenda? It's a renewal of a contract. I think consent would probably work, but I don't want to, I want to make sure.
I'm good with consent as well, yes.
Okay. So 2021-201 will go on our consent calendar for our next commission meeting. That brings us, at long last, to the end of our regular session. Is there a motion related to those items which we have reviewed on our regular agenda to be put on for next week's meeting? Mr. Counselor, you seem to have a question, yes.
I do actually have one just very simple point of clarification before the motion. The very first 3 items we took up, 189, 90, 91, the consensus was to put on consent, and I certainly took that. It is a planning and zoning issue with we either check, approve, or deny. I think it was very clear that the consent was to approve, but I wanted to make sure that everyone heard me give that interpretation before, and if I'm missing it, we can certainly push them off onto regular, but I think everybody wanted them on consent with approval, and so there's direction to staff to make that notification.
Thank you for that clarification and restatement. Is staff clear on that?
That'll be entered into the minutes exactly that way.
Very well. And are both commissioners
Yes, absolutely.
good with that?
Yeah.
Very well. Thank you for that clarification. It doesn't hurt to,
I meant to do those as we go, and if it's consent, we probably need to say that at that time.
I think that makes sense. Very well. Is there a motion related to the placement of our regular agenda items on next week's agenda?
I will make the motion that we put 2021-189, 190, and 191, as well as 2021-161, 2021 Ordinance 26, 2021 Ordinance 27, 2021 Ordinance 28, 2021 Ordinance 29, as well as 2021-194, 2021-195, 2021-197, and 2021-201 on the consent agenda for next Wednesday. And the remaining items from today's agenda on the regular agenda.
Can I ask a clarification?
Yeah, I've got 2 clarifications on that.
Yeah, go ahead. I'd add some too, but you gentlemen, please proceed.
I heard 161 on consent. I wrote down regular for 161.
I had the same.
Okay.
Did you? See, that would be the approval for St. Mary's Home for Mothers group.
Yes, and that needs to be on regular because we made changes to the document.
So 161 is St. Mary's.
Correct.
It is indeed. Okay, I apologize. Got it. Yes, so that should be regular, of course, yes.
And then my second one was 196. I wrote down consent, but it was, I think there was a belief of consent, but also, well, this usually would be regular, but I'm okay with consent, so I wasn't quite sure. I think I wrote down consent, but I
Right.
think the motion was for regular. I just want clarification.
And 196 was,
Thompson Reuters West Law Books Services.
yes, I think we had that as regular. I apologize, I think I've got a couple of them
Okay, so we
out
want
of
that
order.
on regular then for 196?
That involves no expense.
That's right.
Okay.
That's eligible for consent because it really doesn't involve any expense at this time.
Understood.
Your call entirely.
So what is,
Well, yeah, I think if we had discussed regular, I think I'm fine with that. I apologize, I got a couple of the numbers out of order here.
oh, that's no problem. So on 196, what is your motion then on related to that one?
196, I believe we had discussed putting that on regular initially, so I think staying with that is the way to go.
And that was the original motion, so we're fine there. So the only change to the motion that was just made is 169 will go, 161, I'm sorry, will be on consent.
No, on 160.
I'm sorry, it was
regular.
motion on consent will be on regular.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Very well, motion has been made, and I'll make a stab at this. Just to restate the motion, motion has been made to place items 2021-189, 190, 191 on, let's see, also 21 ordinance 26, 21 ordinance 27, 21 ordinance 28, excuse me, 2021 ordinance 29, 2021 194, 2021 195, 2021 197, 2021 201 on consent, the remainder to be placed on our regular agenda for next week. And as was, just to add, just to caveat that, of course, that included the idea of placing 199 ahead of 198 on that agenda. That's the restatement of the motion. Discussion, Commissioner Carpenter. Commissioner Thompson.
No. I think John did Commissioner Carpenter did a great job. It's a tricky thing. That's why I don't do it anymore. It is. You did it.
I was just worried I wouldn't be able to live up to his example when I restated the motion, so that was worrying me. That said, discussion, seeing none, Commissioner Carpenter, you are free to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Yes.
Yes.
That brings us to comment on non-agenda items. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment on any items not covered on today's agenda? Seeing none, are there any office holders who would like to comment on any items not covered on today's agenda? Seeing none. Oh, I'm sorry, please. There you go. Now you're
I
on.
had several questions about how our appeal process is going. First of all, I'd like to let you know we have 1,200 appeals this year. And we've got residential almost finished. We'll finish it up on Monday, the 28th, or Monday, the 28th. Is that Monday, 28th? And then I would like to invite each one of you commissioners at different times, of course, but we do have it posted, so if you all want to come together, that'd be great, to come and sit in on some of the appeal process. Thanks to the commission this year, we actually have help to do this the way it's supposed to be done and detailed. We've got a gal that is extraordinary in computer Excel workshop, computer programs, and is really good on the computer and has really brought our appeal process into the 21st century and is able to keep on top of it, which years before, the last 6 years, we have not been able to have the detail that we have needed to make sure that it is done, that we get it out done, that we have it done right and labeled correctly without a glitch, when we have in the past years. But it's been very difficult because we have not had help. But I will also say that in the next few years, you all might the clerk may be coming for you and asking you for more help in the appeal process because it is a very detailed It's a legal process, and it's a due process for our taxpayers. And we do encourage taxpayers to use this process. There's 3 processes. The first one is an informal process, which is already passed. The appeal process that goes before the board actually is already passed. And then the third process, if you don't like any of the ones that the county has, you can go to the state and argue with the state about your assessed values. But most of the people that we have heard from right now, they're not complaining about their assessed values, but they're complaining about their taxes, which the assessment program and the BOE appeal does not have anything to do with taxes. And that's all I want to say.
Very good. Just a point of clarification from Mr. Counselor. If commissioners choose to sit in on some of these hearings, as long as we are not interacting, if Commissioner Thompson is there, Commissioner Carpenter is there, there is no problem related to sunshine law.
No, I don't think so.
Very good.
And additionally, that appeal process does not typically run through the commission, so you wouldn't be hearing something that would ultimately come to you. It's the BOE, then the State Tax Commission, and then court typically.
That's, yeah, I just want to make the point that the commissioners don't have to worry about coordinating. They can come and go as they see fit to these meetings if they would like to sit in. Any other office holder comments? Seeing none. Are there any agency comments? Seeing none. County Administrator, do you have any comments, Mr. Administrator?
No additional comments, thank you.
Commissioner comments? Commissioner Thompson?
None today, thank you.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Oh, thank you.
I am personally talked out, so I'm good to go to the next item. That brings us to approval of minutes of previous sessions. We have 2 items listed. I would entertain a motion related to that issue.
I'll make a motion to approve the June 23rd, 2021 at 6 p.m. and the July 8th, 2021 at 9 a.m. meeting minutes as printed.
Motion has been made for the approval of the minutes to June 23, 2021, 6 p.m. meeting, and in addition, July 8, 2021, 9 a.m. meeting. I will pause for a moment to see if any commissioners would like to review. We've, of course, already, they've been submitted to us, so I just want to give the courtesy of a last look-see before we vote. We seem to be ready to vote. Are there any comments, or any discussion? Commissioner Carpenter?
No, thank you.
Very well, Commissioner Thompson, that was your motion, so you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
That brings us to written reports. Are there any written reports? No written reports to submit to the commission at this time. That brings us to our executive sessions. We are noticed up for 2, one under real estate and one under legal. Is there a motion related to executive sessions?
I move that we move into executive session on real estate and legal and adjourn therefrom.
Motion has been made to the commissioners to go into executive session under real estate 610-021 parentheses 1 and legal parentheses 1 and adjourn therefrom. Discussion, Commissioner Thompson?
No, thank you.
Very well. Commissioner Carpenter, you are recognized to close.
Close.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
From that, we will go ahead and go into executive session and adjourn therefrom. The public portion of this meeting is concluded.